Have you ever felt trapped by what others think? No matter what you do, someone always has an opinion, a criticism, or a judgment. It can feel heavy, like every step forward is weighed down by fear of disapproval. But here's the truth. Their judgment only has the power you give it. Imagine living free from that weight. Imagine making decisions, taking action, and moving forward without hesitation, without overthinking, without constantly looking for approval. That freedom isn't a dream, it's a choice. And it's a choice you can start making today. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover why no one's judgment can control your life, how to reclaim your focus, and the step-by-step truth that will set you free. If you're ready to stop living for their opinions and start living for yourself, this video is for you. The moment you understand this, your life changes. Momentum, clarity, confidence, and freedom become natural. And by the end, you'll see exactly how to step into that power today, no matter what anyone says. People often form opinions in seconds. They do not wait for context or truth. A single moment becomes the full picture in their mind. This is how judgment begins, fast and incomplete. Most people never ask what you've survived. They don't see the nights you struggled or the choices you were forced to make. They only see outcomes, never the cost behind them. Judgment feels easy because understanding takes effort. Listening requires patience. Empathy demands emotional maturity. Many people simply don't want to do that work. This is why their judgment cannot define you. It is based on fragments, not facts. When you understand this, their opinions lose weight and emotional control. Understanding is slow. Judgment is instant. That's the problem. People react before they reflect, and those reactions often turn into fixed beliefs. Once a belief is formed, many stop listening. New information feels threatening. Admitting they were wrong feels uncomfortable, so judgment stays locked in place. This has nothing to do with your truth. It has everything to do with their mental shortcuts. They prefer certainty over curiosity. When you stop trying to correct every misunderstanding, you reclaim energy. Understanding does not need permission from those who refuse to listen. Many people stay quiet to avoid attention. They think silence will keep them safe. But silence creates space for assumptions, not understanding. When you don't speak, others fill in the gaps. They create stories that match their beliefs. These stories often say more about them than you. Silence can be powerful, but it should be chosen, not forced by fear. Staying quiet to survive judgment only feeds anxiety. Real peace comes when silence is a decision, not a shield. Judgment may still exist, but it no longer controls your actions. Some believe that explaining everything will fix perception. They talk more, clarify more, justify more, yet judgment often remains unchanged. Words cannot convince someone who already decided. The more you explain, the more you drain yourself emotionally. This leads to frustration. You feel unheard, misunderstood, and exhausted, not because you failed, but because the listener never wanted truth. Speaking your truth should be about alignment, not approval. Once you accept that judgment may continue, your voice becomes calmer and stronger. Progress makes people uncomfortable. When you grow, it highlights what others avoid in their own lives. This contrast creates judgment. Some will question how you achieved results. Others will minimize your effort. A few may even doubt your character. This is common. Success breaks expectations. It challenges roles people assign to you. When those roles collapse, judgment fills the gap. Understanding this keeps you grounded. Success does not need defense. Growth speaks louder than explanations ever could. When things fall apart, judgment becomes louder. People notice mistakes more than effort. They focus on outcomes instead of circumstances that led there. Failure is often reduced to labels. Weak, careless, unprepared. These words ignore complexity and erase context completely. Many judge failure because it scares them. It reminds them that effort does not guarantee success, that reality feels uncomfortable. Understanding this helps you detach. Failure is a moment, not an identity. Judgment cannot rewrite your ability to rise again. Even inactivity invites opinions. If you pause, people assume laziness. If you wait, they assume fear. Silence becomes interpreted as weakness. People struggle to accept stillness. They measure value by visible action. When action pauses, judgment fills the space. This pressure pushes many into rushed decisions, not because they are ready, but because they fear perception. Choosing your timing matters more than public approval. Stillness can be strategic, even when others fail to understand it. Judgment often happens without conscious thought. It's a reflex built from habits, culture, and past experiences. People are trained to categorize quickly, safe or unsafe, right or wrong, successful or failing. This shortcut ignores nuance. Automatic judgment feels efficient, but it lacks depth. It replaces learning with assumptions. Once you see judgment as habit, not truth, you stop personalizing it. Awareness creates emotional distance and clarity. Judgment may be common, but its impact is real. Words shape confidence. Opinions influence decisions. Repetition creates self-doubt. Many underestimate how deeply judgment cuts, especially when it comes from familiar voices or repeated patterns. This harm often goes unnoticed. People move on, while the judged carry the weight silently. Recognizing the damage helps you take judgment seriously without letting it control you. Awareness becomes protection. Opinions are endless. They differ by background, beliefs, and experience. No two perspectives are the same. Most opinions are formed without responsibility. People share them freely, without considering impact or accuracy. Living by opinions creates confusion. Direction shifts constantly. Confidence becomes unstable. When you accept that opinions will never stop, you stop chasing agreement. Your focus turns inward, where stability begins. Opinions come easily because they require no commitment. People share thoughts without standing behind them. They speak without responsibility, then move on, leaving the weight behind. This creates noise, not truth. Most opinions are shaped by emotion, not logic. Mood swings and personal bias influence what people say more than facts ever do. What sounds confident is often unsupported. When you treat opinions as facts, confusion grows. Direction becomes unstable. Self-trust weakens over time without you noticing. Learning to separate opinions from reality restores clarity. Not every voice deserves authority over your decisions. Judgment often replaces curiosity. Instead of asking questions, people jump to conclusions. This shortcut feels faster, but removes understanding. Curiosity requires patience. It requires admitting that you don't know everything. Many avoid this because it feels uncomfortable. When curiosity disappears, empathy fades. Assumptions take over. Stories are invented instead of discovered. Protecting your peace means recognizing when curiosity is absent. Without it, judgment has no value. People judge to feel superior. Comparison gives temporary confidence. Looking down on others creates an illusion of control. This behavior usually hides insecurity. When someone doubts themselves, they focus on others' flaws to distract from their own. Superiority never lasts. It needs constant comparison to survive. Without a target, it collapses. Understanding this keeps you from absorbing their judgment. It was never about you to begin with. Judgment is often rooted in fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of falling behind. Fear of change. When someone moves forward, it reminds others of what they postponed. This reminder feels threatening. Instead of facing fear, people criticize what challenges them. It feels safer than self-reflection. Recognizing fear behind judgment removes its power. Fear loses strength when exposed. Many judge to protect their identity. Your growth questions their choices. Your courage highlights their hesitation. Identity feels fragile when it depends on being right. Seeing someone choose differently creates internal conflict. Judgment becomes a defense mechanism. It shields beliefs from being challenged. This has nothing to do with your worth. It reflects their attachment to comfort. Judgment also feeds ego. Feeling right feels rewarding. It creates a false sense of intelligence or authority. Ego prefers certainty. It avoids complexity. Judgment simplifies the world into manageable pieces. But simplicity comes at a cost. It removes depth, truth, and growth. When you see ego at work, judgment stops feeling personal. It becomes predictable. Some judge because it bonds them with others. Shared criticism creates temporary connection. Talking about someone else avoids deeper conversations. It feels safer and easier. This kind of bonding lacks depth. It relies on negativity to survive. You don't need to participate. Silence protects integrity. Judgment distracts people from their own lives. Focusing outward avoids inner discomfort. It's easier to comment than to change. Easier to criticize than to act. This habit becomes routine. Over time, growth stalls. Your focus stays cleaner when you refuse distraction disguised as opinion. People judge what they don't understand. Unfamiliar paths create discomfort. Instead of learning, many reject. Rejection feels simpler than expansion. This limits perspective. Growth becomes optional, not necessary. You are not required to shrink for others' understanding. Judgment often masks envy. What someone desires but avoids becomes a target. Instead of admitting admiration, they criticize. It feels safer than vulnerability. Envy hides behind logic, but emotion drives it. Seeing this clearly helps you detach without resentment. Judgment also hides regret. Seeing someone act triggers memories of missed chances. Regret is heavy. Judgment lightens it temporarily. But avoidance doesn't heal regret. It only delays it. Your movement forward may trigger others, but it's not your burden. Some judge to maintain control. Opinions feel like power. Control feels safer than uncertainty. Judgment creates false stability. When control is threatened, judgment increases. True stability comes from self-direction, not dominance. Judgment thrives where growth is absent. Stagnation looks outward for stimulation. Movement creates contrast. Contrast creates discomfort. Instead of moving, people comment. Your progress speaks, even when you don't set. Judgment simplifies complex lives into labels. Labels feel manageable, but labels erase nuance. They ignore effort, struggle, and evolution. No one fits into a single word or moment. Refusing labels protects your full story. Judgment replaces listening. Once labeled, people stop hearing you. Words lose meaning when minds are closed. This silence is not failure. It is information. Not every audience deserves your voice. Judgment often protects comfort zones. When someone steps outside routine, it disrupts what others rely on for stability. That disruption feels threatening, even when no harm is intended. Comfort zones depend on predictability. Seeing someone choose differently introduces uncertainty. Judgment becomes a way to restore mental balance. Instead of questioning their own limits, people criticize the change they witness. It feels safer than reevaluating habits. Your willingness to move forward exposes stagnation. That exposure invites judgment, not because you're wrong, but because you're brave. Judgment thrives where humility is absent. Admitting uncertainty requires strength. Many avoid it by acting confident in opinions they never tested. False certainty feels powerful. It allows people to speak without risk. Growth, however, demands vulnerability. When humility disappears, learning stops. Judgment replaces curiosity, and progress stalls quietly. Staying grounded means valuing growth over being right. That choice keeps you evolving. Some judge because growth feels intimidating. Watching someone change forces comparison. Comparison often reveals gaps. Those gaps trigger discomfort. Judgment becomes a shield. Instead of asking how, people ask why in a critical tone. The intention is not understanding, but distance. You don't need to slow down for others' comfort. Growth is personal, not negotiable. Judgment can be a habit learned early. Families, environments, and culture normalize it. When judgment becomes routine, people stop noticing its impact. It feels normal, even necessary. Breaking this habit requires awareness. Most never pause long enough to question it. Choosing awareness sets you apart. It also protects your mental clarity. Judgment simplifies decision-making. It avoids complexity and reduces effort. Complexity requires patience. Judgment offers quick conclusions. Quick conclusions feel efficient, but they sacrifice truth. Refusing shortcuts preserves depth and integrity. Some judge to feel relevant. Opinions create attention. Being heard feels validating. Judgment becomes a way to stay visible. But attention gained through negativity is unstable. It fades quickly. Your worth does not depend on commentary or reaction. Judgment also reflects internal conflict. When beliefs clash with reality, discomfort arises. Instead of updating beliefs, people criticize what challenges them. This preserves identity but blocks growth. Your evolution may disrupt others, but that disruption is necessary. Many judge to avoid responsibility. Blame feels lighter than ownership. Pointing outward avoids inward work. Judgment shifts focus away from personal accountability. This cycle repeats until awareness interrupts it. You break cycles by choosing responsibility over reaction. Judgment increases when boundaries appear. Limits challenge access. Not everyone handles boundaries well. Some respond with criticism. Judgment becomes a response to loss of control. Boundaries protect peace, even when misunderstood. Some judge to justify their choices. Seeing alternatives creates doubt. Judgment reassures them they chose correctly. But reassurance built on comparison is fragile. Confidence rooted in self-trust stands firm. Judgment often ignores timing. People compare different chapters unfairly. They forget that growth is not linear. Progress has pauses and leaps. Timing cannot be rushed or copied. Your pace is valid, even when questioned. Judgment can feel louder when familiar voices speak. Proximity adds weight. Expectations increase when people think they know you. Their judgment reflects their version of you, not your reality. You are allowed to evolve beyond old perceptions. Judgment doesn't require accuracy. It survives on assumption. Assumptions feel convincing without proof. Truth demands effort. Judgment does not. Choose truth over reaction. Always. When judgment repeats, it can feel personal. Patterns create pressure. Repeated voices can influence self-perception. Awareness breaks repetition, set this hold. You decide which voices stay. Judgment fades when you stop feeding it. Reaction sustains it. Silence removes fuel. Detachment restores power. Peace grows in the absence of response. Living for approval slowly turns into a quiet prison. At first, it feels harmless to care what others think. Over time, that concern grows into a constant need to be accepted. Decisions stop being guided by values and start being guided by reactions. Approval is unstable. What pleases one person disappoints another. Chasing it creates confusion because the target keeps moving. The more you adjust, the more you lose direction. This cycle drains energy. Mental effort shifts from growth to performance. Life becomes about appearing right instead of living honestly. Freedom begins when approval stops being the goal. When internal alignment replaces external validation, Clarity returns naturally. Seeking validation weakens confidence without being obvious. Each time reassurance is needed, self-trust is postponed. Over time, this habit becomes automatic. Validation feels comforting in the moment, but dependence on it slowly erodes decision-making ability. You begin doubting instincts that once felt clear. This creates hesitation. Choices take longer. Fear of judgment increases. Momentum fades quietly. Rebuilding confidence starts with small acts of trust. Choosing without permission strengthens inner stability again. Trying to please everyone creates internal conflict. Different expectations pull you in opposite directions. No single version of you satisfies all demands. To cope, many begin editing themselves. Opinions soften, boundaries weaken, authentic reactions disappear. This constant adjustment creates exhaustion. The mind never rests because it's always monitoring response. Letting go of universal approval allows your true voice to return. Energy shifts from defense to direction. Fear often replaces authenticity in approval-driven living. The fear of being misunderstood becomes stronger than the desire to be real. When fear leads, expression becomes cautious. Words are filtered. Actions are delayed. Over time, this creates emotional distance from yourself. You begin feeling disconnected without knowing why. Authenticity restores alignment. Even when misunderstood, it feels lighter than living divided. Chasing approval slowly reshapes identity. You begin to see yourself through others' reactions instead of inner truth. This external mirror distorts self-image. Confidence rises and falls with feedback. When reactions disappear, uncertainty increases. Without constant input, direction feels lost. Grounding identity internally stabilizes self-worth. It no longer depends on applause or silence. Approval seeking often leads to over-explanation. You feel the need to justify choices repeatedly. Explanations rarely change judgment. They only extend emotional effort. Over time, explaining becomes exhausting. You feel drained after conversations that should feel simple. Learning when to stay silent protects peace. Not every choice needs defense. Fear of judgment delays action. You wait for the right moment, the right response, the right support. Waiting becomes a habit. Opportunities pass quietly. Regret grows in the space between intention and action. Choosing progress over perception restores momentum. Action builds confidence naturally. Shrinking becomes a survival strategy. You avoid standing out to stay safe. This strategy feels protective but limits potential. Growth slows without resistance. Over time, shrinking feels normal. Dreams become smaller to match comfort. Expansion begins when safety is redefined. Growth always carries risk. Approval dependence creates emotional sensitivity. Small comments feel heavy. Neutral responses feel negative. This sensitivity increases stress. The mind scans constantly for signals. Peace becomes conditional. Calm depends on reactions. Reducing external dependence restores emotional balance. Calm becomes internal again. Fear of rejection often masks fear of self-discovery. Accepting yourself fully feels risky. Rejection by others feels worse when self-acceptance is incomplete. This creates avoidance. You delay fully stepping into your identity. Self-acceptance reduces rejection's impact. Confidence grows quietly. Living for approval teaches self-silencing. You hold back truth to avoid discomfort. Silence becomes routine. Expression feels dangerous. Over time, resentment builds beneath compliance. Honest expression clears emotional weight, even when responses vary. Approval pressure creates overthinking. Simple decisions become complex. Every option is evaluated through imagined reactions. This mental loop creates fatigue. Trusting intuition simplifies choices again. Living this way creates constant self-monitoring. You watch yourself from the outside. Presence disappears. Experience becomes performance. Joy fades without explanation. Letting go of observation restores connection to life. Approval dependence hides true potential. You never fully test yourself. Fear limits effort. Safety feels preferable to discovery. But safety without growth becomes suffocating. Releasing approval reveals capability you forgot existed. Awareness marks the turning point. Recognizing the pattern changes everything. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. Choice becomes possible again. Freedom begins with awareness. Over-explaining becomes a habit when self-trust weakens. You begin adding extra details, not for clarity, but to prevent misunderstanding. Each explanation is an attempt to control perception. The more you explain, the more you feel exposed. Instead of relief, anxiety increases because responses remain unpredictable. Approval never fully arrives. This pattern slowly drains confidence. You start questioning choices that once felt natural. Decisions feel heavier than they should. Reducing explanation strengthens authority. Silence, when intentional, communicates confidence without effort. Unnecessary apologies often follow approval-driven behavior. You apologize for taking space, for having needs, for choosing differently. These apologies train others to expect less resistance. Boundaries blur quietly. Over time, self-respect erodes. You begin feeling small without knowing why. Reclaiming dignity starts by apologizing only when necessary. Respect grows from clarity, not submission. Doubt grows when instincts are ignored. Each time you dismiss inner signals, trust weakens. External voices become louder. Inner guidance fades into the background. This imbalance creates confusion. Direction feels uncertain, even with experience. Listening inward rebuilds confidence. Intuition strengthens with use. Hesitation becomes a default response under constant judgment. You pause longer than needed. You second-guess progress. This hesitation costs opportunities. Momentum slows quietly. Fear disguises itself as caution. Comfort feels safer than risk. Choosing movement over hesitation restores flow. Action builds clarity. Feeling watched increases self-consciousness. Awareness shifts from experience to perception. Presence disappears. Life feels staged. This pressure creates emotional distance from joy and creativity. Letting go of imagined observation restores natural expression. Feeling trapped often follows prolonged self-monitoring. Freedom feels conditional. Choices shrink to avoid reaction. Possibilities narrow. This confinement grows silently. You adjust without noticing loss. Recognizing the trap opens the door to change. The realization often arrives suddenly. You notice how much energy judgment consumes. Mental space clears when awareness appears. Questions replace habits. Choices feel available again. This moment marks the start of freedom. Understanding that judgment existed before action changes perspective. Opinions formed long ago. Nothing you do fully alters perception. This removes pressure to perform. You stop trying to rewrite stories you never created. Trying harder does not silence critics. Effort does not guarantee understanding. Misinterpretation persists despite clarity. This realization brings relief. Responsibility drops. You act from alignment, not expectation. Silence does not correct narratives. Misunderstanding continues regardless. Explaining every detail becomes exhausting. Energy shifts towards self-protection. Choosing peace over correction becomes natural. Perfection offers no protection. Flawlessness invites scrutiny. Standards shift higher when met. Pressure increases without reward. Letting go of perfection reduces stress instantly. Success does not stop judgment. It changes its tone. Praise mixes with doubt. New expectations appear. Success requires resilience, not validation. Failure does not attract compassion automatically. Judgment often increases during vulnerability. This reveals character differences. Strength grows through acceptance, not reaction. Even kindness can be questioned. Motives are doubted. Good intentions do not prevent suspicion. This realization feels discouraging at first. Then it becomes freeing. Growth itself becomes a trigger. Change challenges familiarity. Old labels no longer fit. Resistance appears unexpectedly. Growth continues anyway. Growth often changes how judgment sounds. It becomes quieter but sharper. Instead of open criticism, it arrives as subtle doubt, indirect comments, and quiet distancing. This form of judgment feels confusing at first. Nothing is said directly, yet something feels different. Support becomes conditional. Encouragement fades. This shift reveals an important truth. Growth rearranges relationships. Not everyone is prepared for the version of you that moves forward. Accepting this prevents disappointment. Change naturally reshapes connection, and that is not failure. Healing can also attract judgment. When you stop reacting, others notice. Calm disrupts patterns they relied on. Some expect you to remain predictable. When you change your response, their expectations collapse. Judgment replaces understanding. They may call it distance or coldness. In reality, it is stability. Healing does not require explanation. Peace speaks through consistency. Judgment remains constant across situations. Whether rising or resting, someone always has an opinion. This realization removes illusion. There is no perfect position that avoids criticism. Waiting for the right moment becomes unnecessary. Judgment exists regardless of timing. Freedom grows when action is no longer delayed by perception. Resisting judgment creates tension. Fighting it consumes energy without resolution. Mental resistance keeps judgment active in your thoughts. Acceptance changes the dynamic. Judgment exists, but it no longer controls behavior. Acceptance is not agreement. It is emotional release. Clarity begins when confusion fades. You stop questioning every response. Thoughts slow down. Mental noise reduces. Decisions become simpler when they are value-based. Clarity grows from internal consistency, not external feedback. Confusion feeds fear quietly. Uncertainty creates hesitation. Fear exaggerates consequences. Judgment feels heavier than it is. When clarity returns, fear loses influence. Understanding restores emotional balance. Fear strengthens people-pleasing behavior. Avoiding discomfort becomes priority. Boundaries soften. Opinions gain authority. This cycle reinforces itself without awareness. Breaking it restores personal agency. Awareness interrupts automatic reaction. You notice patterns instead of obeying them. Observation creates space. Space creates choice. Choice restores power. Power reduces fear. Judgment loses impact when clearly identified. Naming the pattern reduces emotional charge. Distance forms naturally. Reactions slow. What once felt personal becomes predictable. Predictability removes intimidation. Opinions lose weight when self-respect increases. Internal alignment outweighs commentary. You begin valuing consistency over approval. Confidence stabilizes without effort. Stability attracts calm. Self-respect reshapes priorities. Peace becomes non-negotiable. Arguments feel unnecessary. Explanation feels optional. Energy shifts toward purpose. Life simplifies without force. Alignment replaces anxiety gradually. Choices feel lighter. Inner conflict fades. Direction sharpens. You stop measuring yourself through others. Confidence grows quietly. When defense stops, tension dissolves. There is nothing to protect. Openness replaces fear. Strength becomes visible through calm. Calm changes everything. Explaining less restores authority. Silence communicates certainty. Words become intentional. Presence replaces performance. Respect follows naturally. Shrinking stops when self-trust returns. Space feels safe again. Expression flows without pressure. You occupy your place fully. Freedom becomes familiar. Once judgment is clearly recognized, its emotional grip weakens. What once felt heavy begins to feel distant. You notice reactions without absorbing them. This awareness creates space between stimulus and response. That space becomes protective. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. Pausing gives clarity, and clarity removes unnecessary emotional cost. Judgment no longer feels personal. It feels patterned, predictable, and limited. This understanding softens its impact. With time, judgment becomes background noise rather than a guiding force. As opinions lose emotional charge, inner stability grows. Decisions begin to feel calmer and more intentional. You are no longer pulled in multiple directions. This stability does not come from isolation, it comes from alignment. When values are clear, noise fades naturally. You stop checking reactions for confirmation. Confidence no longer needs witnesses. Stability becomes your default state, not something borrowed from approval. When inner alignment strengthens, external voices weaken. Their volume stays the same, but their influence drops. You start choosing based on meaning instead of reaction. This shift feels subtle but powerful. Life begins to flow with less resistance. Decisions feel cleaner. Regret lessens. Alignment removes friction created by constant self-questioning. Anxiety fades when consistency replaces performance. You no longer feel pressure to appear acceptable. This release allows natural expression. Words feel honest. Actions feel grounded. The mind rests more often. Overthinking reduces without effort. Peace emerges as a byproduct of authenticity. Stopping defense changes everything. There is nothing to argue, nothing to prove. Without defense, tension dissolves. Conversations feel lighter. Silence feels comfortable. Defensiveness once consumed energy. Its absence restores focus. Strength becomes visible through calm presence. Choosing consciously replaces reactive living. Each decision carries intention. Intentional choices build trust in yourself. Trust compounds quickly. Confidence stops fluctuating. It stabilizes. Consistency replaces emotional exhaustion. Reclaiming emotional energy feels noticeable. Mental clarity increases. Focus sharpens. You become selective with attention. Not every comment earns response. This selectivity protects creativity and momentum. Energy shifts toward progress, not defense. Breathing changes when pressure lifts. The body relaxes naturally. Physical calm reflects mental clarity. Tension leaves quietly. You feel lighter without trying. Presence becomes easier to maintain. Movement changes when self-consciousness fades. You act without hesitation. Actions feel fluid. Timing improves. You trust decisions without replaying them. Momentum builds naturally. Speech becomes simpler and more direct. Words carry intention, not anxiety. You say less, but meaning deepens. Silence feels powerful rather than awkward. Communication becomes grounded. Standing grounded does not require force. It requires clarity. You remain steady even when challenged. Emotional balance becomes visible. Others sense certainty without explanation. Letting people think what they want removes pressure. Control is released. You stop managing impressions. Freedom expands in that release. Life feels more open. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Selectivity becomes wisdom. Privacy protects focus. Boundaries sharpen direction. Peace strengthens through discernment. Opinions lose urgency when relevance is questioned. You ask who benefits from attention. This filter removes distraction. Mental space opens. Clarity deepens. Emotional independence grows with practice. You rely less on reaction. Internal guidance strengthens. Confidence becomes self-sustaining. Freedom stabilizes. Detachment becomes a natural habit once judgment loses its grip. You start observing opinions without absorbing them. Each comment, criticism, or assumption passes by like clouds in the sky, noticed but not acted upon. Over time, this creates a sense of emotional spaciousness you never had before. This detachment allows you to evaluate situations without distraction. Previously, judgment dictated decisions quietly, shaping choices without permission. Now, decisions are grounded in clarity, free from the subtle pressures of perceived approval. Energy once consumed by reacting to every opinion now shifts toward meaningful action. Time feels less fragmented, and mental focus strengthens. You realize how much was wasted trying to satisfy voices that never mattered. Detachment does not mean indifference. Instead, it represents emotional sovereignty, a calm, steady presence that chooses alignment over reaction, stability over chaos, and truth over assumption. Emotional resilience grows when you refuse to internalize judgment. Challenges that once caused doubt now become opportunities to test self-trust. External reactions, no matter how sharp or persistent, no longer dictate mood or action. Resilience emerges slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. You notice a subtle confidence that did not exist before. Decisions no longer feel urgent because your internal guidance has taken priority over external noise. Repeated experiences with criticism now reinforce this resilience rather than diminish it. Each encounter that might have caused stress before becomes an exercise in clarity, strength, and focus. Ultimately, resilience allows forward momentum without compromise. You operate from stability, moving intentionally rather than reactively, and judgment becomes an observation rather than a command. Boundaries strengthen naturally as awareness grows. You begin to identify which opinions deserve attention and which do not. Time and energy become selective, reserved for those aligned with your purpose or values. This selective focus reduces distraction and increases productivity. Tasks that once felt overwhelming now have room to breathe. Mental bandwidth expands as unnecessary input is filtered automatically. Boundaries also foster respect. People sense self-assuredness and respond differently. Instead of reacting to every critique, you create space for reflection, discussion, or detachment. Establishing and maintaining boundaries is not about alienation. It is about creating clarity and conserving energy. Life becomes manageable, focused, and intentional as a result. Confidence grows quietly when judgment no longer dictates behavior. Small choices build trust in your own instincts. You notice that decision-making becomes smoother and less burdened by second-guessing. Confidence is reinforced by repeated experience. Each time a choice aligns with your inner guidance and produces progress, trust deepens. External opinions matter less because results speak louder. This quiet growth manifests as natural authority. You do not need to prove capability or defend position. Presence alone communicates competence and steadiness. Eventually, confidence becomes a core foundation of action, replacing fear with clarity and calm, and replacing doubt with subtle certainty. Internal peace emerges as judgment fades. The constant mental noise that previously caused stress diminishes. Reactions that once triggered tension now slide past effortlessly. Peace is not passive. It is intentional. You no longer expend energy controlling perceptions or anticipating criticism. Life moves more fluidly, and decision-making feels effortless. This state allows creativity, focus, and emotional freedom to expand. Previously overshadowed goals now have room to grow, and personal direction feels natural and sustainable. Peace becomes a self-sustaining loop. Calm begets clarity. Clarity begets focus. And focus allows growth to continue without interference from others' judgments. Decision-making improves as judgment loses influence. Choices become grounded in intention rather than fear. Priorities are clearer, and hesitation diminishes. You notice subtle differences in outcomes. Decisions taken from clarity feel lighter and often produce better results. The mental load of approval seeking disappears. Over time, the process becomes second nature. You trust instincts, evaluate options, and proceed without constant validation. Decision-making transforms from a source of stress into a tool of empowerment and momentum. Freedom becomes noticeable in every aspect of life. Actions are no longer filtered by perceived perception. Goals are pursued without pause, hesitation, or worry about outside commentary. This freedom produces confidence, resilience, and internal satisfaction. You move through life with direction, purpose, and intentionality. Even in challenging environments, freedom remains steady. External noise continues, but it lacks control. Your path is defined by values, alignment, and internal clarity. Freedom feels natural and inevitable. It is a byproduct of consistent self-trust and detachment from irrelevant opinions. Emotional independence strengthens as patterns of judgment lose power. You stop reacting to others' emotional states or expectations. Reactions, once immediate and overwhelming, now pass without internal disruption. This independence enhances stability in relationships, work, and personal pursuits. Life no longer feels dictated by the moods or opinions of others. Energy is redirected toward creation, action, and focus instead of defense or adjustment. Over time, emotional independence becomes a foundational strength, allowing you to operate consistently regardless of external pressures. Self-direction emerges as judgment fades into the background. You make choices based on priorities, not fear of criticism. Actions are aligned with vision rather than reaction. Self-direction creates clarity and efficiency. Tasks that previously required overthinking now unfold naturally. Confidence and momentum increase simultaneously. By cultivating this autonomy, you reduce stress and increase focus, allowing for sustainable growth and achievement. Self-direction is freedom in action, producing outcomes that reflect your true intentions rather than the expectations of others. Presence deepens as concern for judgment diminishes. You inhabit your life fully, noticing experience instead of evaluating perception. Moments feel richer and more meaningful. Presence allows creativity, connection, and clarity to flourish. Mental energy previously spent on worrying about judgment is reclaimed for focus and growth. You act authentically, and interactions feel effortless. Others respond to authenticity rather than performance. Presence becomes a subtle but powerful force, influencing both internal state and external outcomes without needing words. Consistency strengthens when judgment no longer disrupts rhythm. Daily routines, choices, and actions align with internal priorities rather than external approval. Consistency creates compounding growth. Each aligned action produces cumulative momentum. Effort feels natural and purposeful. External judgment no longer interrupts this rhythm. Stability in action and thought reduces mental strain and enhances clarity. Consistency becomes a personal standard, allowing sustained progress and minimizing interference from outside opinions. Momentum builds as judgment loses control. Action accelerates because hesitation and doubt no longer dominate thinking. Each small success reinforces trust in decision-making. Progress compounds naturally. Momentum creates confidence and clarity simultaneously. Fear diminishes in the face of repeated forward movement. Eventually, this momentum becomes self-sustaining, producing growth, achievement, and personal satisfaction without reliance on external validation. Clarity reaches new levels when judgment is fully internalized as irrelevant. Thoughts are no longer tangled in the weight of opinions. Decision-making, focus, and emotional response operate from internal principles. This clarity enhances productivity, emotional stability, and effectiveness. Goals are approached strategically rather than reactively. Life feels manageable, purposeful, and internally directed. Energy is conserved and amplified. Clarity is the foundation for sustained freedom, growth, and confidence. Self-trust strengthens when judgment is no longer internalized. Decisions that once caused hesitation now feel natural, even effortless. You notice a quiet authority developing within yourself, a certainty that was previously absent when external voices dominated thinking. This self-trust allows actions to align with long-term priorities rather than immediate perception. You stop over-analyzing others' reactions and instead measure success by internal consistency and personal growth. Every choice begins to feel intentional rather than pressured. Energy previously consumed by doubt or defense is redirected toward meaningful action, creative problem-solving, and focused effort. Life feels more manageable because clarity and trust operate silently in the background, guiding decisions. As self-trust becomes habitual, dependence on external validation disappears. What once required reassurance now rests entirely within your awareness, allowing freedom and peace to coexist naturally with growth. Judgment loses power when attention is consciously redirected. Focus shifts from what others think to what is necessary, productive, and aligned with your goals. Mental energy becomes concentrated rather than scattered, and priorities regain visibility. This redirection allows more effective planning, sharper decision-making, and consistent forward movement. External noise is noticed but no longer interrupts flow, creating a mental environment conducive to efficiency and calm. By practicing selective attention, distraction decreases naturally. You observe criticism or opinion without feeling compelled to react or adjust behavior unnecessarily. This process strengthens autonomy. Life becomes measured by alignment and intentionality, rather than the opinions of others, fostering confidence and resilience simultaneously. Emotional clarity grows as judgment becomes background noise. You recognize the difference between valuable feedback and irrelevant opinion. Emotional responses are no longer dictated by external reactions, but by measured evaluation of what matters. This clarity improves relationships, decision-making, and self-perception. Interactions with others become more intentional, conversations more measured, and reactions less impulsive. Previously, judgment caused unnecessary tension and mental fatigue. Now, understanding the distinction allows energy to be conserved for productive and meaningful endeavors. Emotional clarity reinforces internal stability, enabling consistent action and sustained growth without the burden of constant mental debate over others' opinions. Freedom becomes tangible when judgment no longer dictates choices. You move through situations without hesitation or fear, making decisions aligned with goals and values, rather than reactions to perception. This freedom manifests in increased momentum, smoother decision-making, and a sense of flow in daily life. Opportunities are approached confidently because internal alignment guides action rather than external noise. As a result, fear, doubt, and overthinking diminish, and energy can be devoted entirely to growth, creation, and consistent progress. Ultimately, freedom becomes self-reinforcing. The more you act aligned with purpose, the less judgment matters, and the more your life flows with intentionality. Focus intensifies when you stop prioritizing others' opinions. Attention is redirected to personal growth, productivity, and meaningful tasks rather than monitoring reactions, interpreting comments, or attempting to control perception. This focus allows deeper thinking, more effective problem-solving, and faster progress. Momentum builds naturally because effort is concentrated rather than dissipated across irrelevant concerns. Judgment may still occur externally, but it lacks influence internally. Choices are based on strategy, priorities, and internal alignment rather than external pressures. Sustained focus amplifies growth, producing results that reinforce confidence and reduce reliance on approval. Resilience strengthens when judgment fails to destabilize mental equilibrium. External commentary no longer triggers emotional overreaction or self-doubt. This resilience is cultivated over time as repeated exposure to judgment meets consistent internal detachment and clarity. You begin to respond with composure, not defensiveness, to criticism or unsolicited opinions. Resilience improves overall performance, decision-making, and emotional health. You can maintain progress regardless of external narrative, sustaining growth even in environments dominated by opinion or negativity. Ultimately, resilience becomes a stabilizing force, ensuring that judgment never undermines direction or purpose. Boundaries solidify naturally when judgment is no longer internalized. You clearly define which opinions, comments, or feedback deserve attention and which are irrelevant, creating mental and emotional space. These boundaries conserve energy, reduce stress, and prevent distraction from meaningful action. Previously, minor criticism or irrelevant commentary would erode focus. Now boundaries maintain clarity and direction. Boundaries also improve relationships. People learn to respect the space, energy, and priorities you create for yourself. Over time, boundaries become effortless. Maintaining focus and personal integrity no longer feels like effort. It becomes standard practice. Momentum accelerates as fear of judgment diminishes. Actions proceed without hesitation. Decisions are executed efficiently, and progress compounds naturally. The absence of distraction allows longer stretches of productive thought, creative problem-solving, and strategic action. Energy previously spent on defense or self-monitoring is redirected toward meaningful results. Momentum is reinforced by confidence and clarity. The more consistently you act aligned with purpose, the less judgment influences choice, and the smoother progress becomes. This creates a self-reinforcing loop. Action reduces doubt, reduces distraction, and reinforces alignment. Internal stability grows when judgment is consistently observed and released. External reactions no longer destabilize emotional or mental equilibrium. You maintain composure even in challenging or critical environments. This stability allows rational thinking to prevail over impulsive reaction. Emotional energy is no longer consumed unnecessarily, enabling focus on important priorities. Stability also supports consistency in action, communication, and decision-making. Growth continues predictably and sustainably. Eventually, this stability becomes second nature, producing calm, clarity, and consistent progress in every area of life. Presence deepens when judgment no longer intrudes. You inhabit the moment fully, noticing details, opportunities, and possibilities that were previously overlooked. Presence allows decision-making to be grounded in reality rather than perception. Interactions become richer, more meaningful, and less reactive. Energy is conserved because mental effort is not wasted interpreting or defending against irrelevant opinions. Presence becomes a quiet yet powerful tool, influencing outcomes, relationships, and internal peace without effort. Decision-making sharpens as judgment fades. Choices are made with clarity, alignment, and purpose, rather than fear of perception. This clarity increases efficiency and confidence. Outcomes improve naturally as actions are based on reality and priorities, not reaction to external opinion. You notice subtle improvements in consistency, productivity, and results. Decision-making becomes effortless, intentional, and self-reinforcing. Emotional independence strengthens, reducing the weight of external influence. Mental focus shifts from reaction to creation, planning, and strategic action. Independence allows freedom in thought and movement. Life flows more naturally because decisions are grounded internally. Confidence grows quietly as reliance on external validation disappears. Emotional independence becomes a pillar of freedom, stability, and personal growth. Clarity becomes dominant when judgment is internalized as irrelevant. Thoughts, actions, and decisions operate from values rather than perception. Mental noise diminishes. Priorities are reinforced. Actions become more predictable, productive, and aligned with internal objectives. Clarity also amplifies self-confidence, reduces anxiety, and enhances momentum. Over time, this clarity becomes a defining attribute, shaping consistent growth and progress. Consistency becomes a natural rhythm. When judgment loses its weight, actions are performed without the interference of overthinking or overanalyzing others' reactions. Daily routines feel smoother because they are guided by internal priorities rather than perceived approval or expectation. This rhythm creates momentum that compounds over time. Each decision made in alignment reinforces the next, producing a cycle of confident, purposeful action. External opinions may exist, but they no longer interrupt focus or direction. The mind becomes calmer as routines stabilize. Energy previously spent monitoring judgment is now available for creative thought, problem solving, and meaningful progress. Life feels more cohesive and intentional. Ultimately, consistency fosters internal trust, allowing you to maintain course even when faced with criticism, misunderstanding, or unexpected challenges. Freedom solidifies when external judgment is recognized but not internalized. You begin to act without hesitation, guided by values rather than the need for validation. Every step is intentional, producing momentum that was previously slowed by worry or self-doubt. This freedom feels tangible, flowing through decisions, relationships, and personal projects. Energy is redirected from unnecessary defense to constructive action, producing results aligned with purpose. The absence of external influence allows you to move with clarity and confidence, without second-guessing or mental interference. Life becomes manageable and expansive simultaneously. With time, freedom becomes self-sustaining, reinforcing confidence, stability, and growth without reliance on approval or perception. Momentum builds naturally when judgment no longer dictates pace. Decisions are executed without hesitation, and the feedback loop of internal alignment produces compound results. Progress accelerates as focus remains undisturbed by external noise. Each action reinforces trust in your own instincts and abilities. You recognize that external opinions are not a measure of value or competence, freeing attention for intentional work. Momentum also improves resilience, as progress itself becomes evidence of capability, reducing doubt and fear. The more consistently you act aligned with purpose, the less judgment affects performance. Ultimately, momentum transforms from a fragile state, dependent on reassurance, into a stable, self-sustaining force that drives growth and achievement. Boundaries deepen when judgment no longer influences perception. You naturally discern which voices deserve attention and which do not. Mental and emotional space expands, protecting focus and energy. Boundaries also cultivate respect, both from others and within yourself. By defining your personal limits and refusing to engage with irrelevant opinions, you create an environment conducive to growth and clarity. This selective engagement allows prioritization of meaningful actions, reducing distraction and emotional fatigue. Energy becomes concentrated on objectives rather than defense. Over time, boundaries become instinctive, maintaining clarity, stability, and focus without requiring conscious effort. Confidence solidifies as judgment loses its power. Choices are made decisively, without hesitation or overanalysis. Trust in your instincts grows, creating a sense of calm authority in every action. Confidence now stems from internal alignment rather than external validation. Repeatedly acting in accordance with priorities reinforces trust in judgment and produces a quiet, reliable strength. This strength improves performance, emotional resilience, and mental clarity. Life moves forward efficiently because decisions are rooted in principle and alignment rather than fear or pressure. Eventually, confidence becomes second nature, allowing freedom, stability, and effectiveness to coexist seamlessly in every area of life. Clarity expands when judgment is observed and released. Mental noise diminishes, making priorities visible and decisions easier to make. Distractions caused by external opinion lose their influence. Clarity also fosters emotional stability. Thoughts are measured, responses are intentional, and internal energy is conserved for meaningful action. This clear perspective improves focus, productivity, and the ability to navigate challenges without unnecessary tension or doubt. Over time, clarity becomes a foundation for sustainable growth, momentum, and consistent progress in both personal and professional life. Emotional independence strengthens as judgment is no longer internalized. Reactions to others' opinions become optional rather than automatic, allowing mental focus and energy to be reserved for purpose-driven tasks. Independence also fosters resilience, as emotional stability no longer depends on external validation. You operate from self-trust, making decisions confidently regardless of perception or commentary. This autonomy allows for more meaningful engagement with life, as energy is spent creating and building rather than defending or justifying. Emotional independence becomes a pillar of freedom, supporting consistent progress, calm, and internal stability. Presence deepens as judgment loses relevance. Attention fully engages with the current moment, allowing for richer experience, clearer perception, and more intentional action. Presence allows observation without reaction, enabling better decisions and calmer interactions. Energy that was previously lost to anticipation, worry, or defense is reclaimed. This heightened presence improves personal performance, relationships, and internal peace. Life feels more immediate and manageable. Presence becomes both a tool and a natural state, fostering clarity, calm, and focus. Decision-making improves when judgment is neutralized. Choices become grounded in priorities, rather than fear of perception or criticism. Decisions feel lighter, more efficient, and more aligned with long-term goals. Hesitation diminishes, and confidence grows naturally from repeated alignment. The mental load of overthinking diminishes, freeing energy for strategic thought and focused action. Decision-making becomes a seamless process, grounded in clarity, purpose, and self-trust. Consistency, momentum, and clarity converge as judgment loses influence. Daily life feels smoother, progress accelerates, and internal stability strengthens. Energy is concentrated, focus is precise, and action becomes intentional. This convergence produces sustained growth, confidence, and resilience. Mental space is reclaimed from distraction, creating capacity for meaningful achievements. You notice results improve naturally, reinforcing trust and alignment rather than external feedback. Ultimately, life flows more smoothly, decisions are more effective, and freedom becomes self-sustaining. Consistency becomes effortless when judgment is no longer a controlling factor. Actions are guided by internal principles rather than fear of perception. Daily routines flow smoothly because they are rooted in priorities instead of external validation, allowing natural momentum to build with minimal resistance. This effortless consistency fosters trust in your own judgment. Each aligned action reinforces the next, creating a compounding effect that accelerates progress. External opinions no longer disrupt rhythm or focus, allowing energy to remain directed toward meaningful goals. With repeated alignment, confidence solidifies. Decisions are made with calm authority, independent of external reaction. This stability allows for deliberate, intentional growth rather than reactive, anxiety-driven movement. Over time, consistent action becomes habitual, producing sustainable progress, freedom from distraction, and a sense of mastery over your own priorities and decisions. Freedom emerges as judgment fades from influence. Choices are no longer filtered by anticipated criticism or expectation. Actions flow naturally, driven by clarity, values, and purpose rather than perception, producing momentum and confidence simultaneously. This freedom allows exploration and growth without hesitation. Opportunities are approached decisively, and fear or overthinking no longer delays progress. Energy that was previously spent managing perceptions is now fully available for creation and action. As external influence diminishes, self-direction strengthens. You recognize that personal alignment, not approval, determines outcomes, and the pace of progress is dictated solely by intention and focus. Freedom becomes self-reinforcing. The more you act from alignment, the less judgment matters, and the more your life unfolds with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Momentum accelerates as judgment loses relevance. Actions are taken promptly, and decisions proceed without unnecessary hesitation. Internal alignment produces a natural compounding effect, reinforcing confidence and trust in instinct. Each step forward strengthens momentum further, making progress feel easier, more intuitive, and more predictable. Energy is not wasted on defending or explaining, leaving more available for meaningful strategic action. Momentum also builds resilience. Progress itself becomes evidence of capability, reducing the mental weight of doubt and fear. The more consistently you move forward, the less judgment can disrupt growth. Ultimately, momentum transforms into a self-sustaining force, creating forward motion that continues regardless of external opinion or interference. Boundaries become more defined as judgment loses influence. You naturally discern which opinions deserve attention and which do not, creating space for focus, clarity, and meaningful action. Boundaries protect mental and emotional energy, reducing distraction and preventing unnecessary stress. By establishing limits, interactions become more intentional, and energy is preserved for priorities that truly matter. People learn to respect boundaries as you consistently demonstrate self-assuredness. Respect and clarity reinforce one another, creating an environment conducive to growth and confidence. Over time, these boundaries require no conscious effort. They are maintained automatically, allowing sustained focus, energy conservation, and emotional stability. Confidence solidifies when judgment loses control over perception. You make decisions decisively, without hesitation, and trust in instinct grows steadily with each aligned action. This confidence stems from internal alignment, rather than external validation. Each successful, self-guided choice reinforces trust and judgment, creating a quiet authority and calm certainty in action. Confidence improves performance, emotional resilience, and clarity. Life moves forward smoothly because decisions are rooted in principle and alignment, rather than fear, criticism, or expectation. Eventually, confidence becomes habitual. It produces consistent growth, internal stability, and freedom from the mental burden of managing judgment. Clarity expands as judgment becomes irrelevant. Mental noise diminishes, priorities become visible, and decisions are easier to make. Distractions caused by external opinions lose influence, allowing focus to sharpen. Clarity also improves emotional stability. Thoughts are measured, responses are intentional, and energy is conserved for meaningful endeavors, rather than defense or overreaction. This enhanced perspective improves productivity, problem solving, and the ability to navigate challenges without unnecessary stress or doubt. Over time, clarity becomes a foundation for sustained momentum, growth, and intentional progress in all areas of life. Emotional independence grows as judgment fades. You rely less on external validation for confidence or emotional stability, allowing internal guidance to direct action consistently. This independence reduces distraction and stress, as emotional energy is no longer consumed by responding to opinion. Focus is redirected toward creation, planning, and intentional growth. Independence also reinforces resilience. Decisions can be made calmly regardless of criticism or perception, ensuring momentum is maintained without disruption. Emotional independence becomes a core pillar of freedom, focus, and sustainable achievement, producing stability that lasts. Presence deepens as judgment loses relevance. You inhabit the moment fully, noticing opportunities, details, and nuances that were previously overshadowed by overanalysis or self-consciousness. Presence improves decision-making, interactions, and personal performance. Energy previously spent worrying about judgment is reclaimed for focus and meaningful action. This deeper engagement enhances productivity, clarity, and emotional balance. Life feels more tangible, manageable, and aligned with priorities. Presence becomes both a tool and a natural state, enhancing internal stability and external effectiveness simultaneously. Decision-making sharpens when judgment no longer interferes. Choices are guided by priorities and purpose, rather than fear of perception or criticism. Decisions feel lighter, more confident, and more effective. Hesitation diminishes, and actions are aligned with internal objectives rather than reaction to external input. This clarity reduces stress, conserves energy, and amplifies momentum, producing outcomes that reinforce self-trust rather than seeking approval. Decision-making transforms into an effortless, consistent, and reliable process, grounded in alignment and focus. Consistency, momentum, clarity, and confidence converge as judgment loses influence entirely. Daily life flows smoothly, progress accelerates, and internal stability strengthens, producing a sustained state of focus, energy, and growth. Energy is concentrated on meaningful action, not spent on managing perception or fear of criticism. The mind and emotions are aligned, enabling intentional decision-making and consistent achievement. This convergence reinforces itself. The more aligned and intentional action becomes, the less judgment impacts life, creating a self-sustaining cycle of clarity, freedom, and growth. Life becomes smoother, progress becomes predictable, and internal freedom solidifies, producing the final foundation of empowerment. Self-awareness deepens as judgment loses influence. You begin noticing thoughts, reactions, and patterns without immediately reacting to external opinion. Observation replaces anxiety, and clarity grows naturally. This awareness allows for better decision-making. Previously unnoticed triggers or habitual responses are now visible, giving you choice in action. Mental energy is freed from unnecessary defense. Self-awareness also strengthens confidence. Recognizing patterns empowers you to act deliberately rather than reactively, reinforcing trust in your own judgment. Over time, self-awareness becomes second nature, creating consistent alignment between thought, intention, and action in every situation. Personal growth accelerates when judgment is neutralized. You focus on meaningful development rather than pleasing others, allowing progress to compound naturally. This acceleration emerges quietly. Energy that was previously consumed by worry, self-monitoring, or overanalysis is redirected toward tangible growth. Goals are approached deliberately, producing visible results. Growth without judgment-driven distraction builds resilience. Challenges are faced with clarity and composure rather than hesitation or fear. Sustained focus and alignment allow growth to become effortless and self-reinforcing, producing lasting momentum. Autonomy strengthens as you detach from judgment. Decisions are made independently, free from influence or expectation. This produces internal consistency and emotional stability. Autonomy allows clear prioritization of tasks and goals. Energy is spent creating and acting rather than defending or justifying. Productivity naturally increases. Independence also cultivates resilience. Challenges or criticism no longer destabilize focus or momentum. Actions remain consistent, Autonomy becomes a foundation for internal freedom, clarity, and sustainable growth in every area of life. Confidence grows when judgment no longer disrupts focus. Small successes compound, reinforcing trust and instinct, judgment and decision-making. With consistent internal alignment, hesitation diminishes, choices become decisive and intentional, external opinion loses relevance. Confidence allows for efficient progress, creating a quiet authority that doesn't require validation or explanation. Eventually, confidence becomes habitual, producing freedom, stability, and momentum across personal and professional domains. Boundaries solidify when judgment is observed and released. You instinctively filter which opinions matter and which do not, protecting mental and emotional space. This clarity allows for selective engagement, reducing distraction and emotional fatigue. Tasks, relationships, and decisions are approached intentionally. Boundaries foster respect from others and reinforce self-respect internally. Energy is conserved for actions that matter. Over time, boundaries become automatic, enabling consistent focus, stability, and personal growth without conscious effort. Momentum accelerates naturally as judgment fades. Decisions are made quickly and confidently, producing a self-reinforcing cycle of progress and trust in instinct. Each completed action reinforces the next, compounding momentum. Fear and hesitation lose influence, and energy is fully directed toward meaningful goals. Momentum also strengthens resilience, as each forward step becomes evidence of capability and stability, reducing the impact of external opinion. This momentum becomes self-sustaining, creating continuous growth and progress independent of external validation. Emotional independence grows when judgment is recognized but not internalized. Reactions to others' opinions become optional, preserving mental energy for action and focus. Independence fosters stability, resilience, and clarity. Decisions are guided by priorities, not perception. Stress caused by external criticism diminishes. Energy previously spent managing opinion is redirected to strategic and meaningful endeavors. Life feels lighter, calmer, and more controllable. Emotional independence becomes a pillar of personal freedom, focus, and consistent achievement. Focus intensifies as judgment diminishes. Attention is no longer divided by concern for perception or approval, enabling deeper engagement with meaningful tasks and priorities. Focused energy produces better results and allows for sustained momentum. External distractions lose power, freeing mental space for strategy and progress. This focus strengthens alignment, efficiency, and internal stability. Decisions become more intentional, and outcomes more predictable. Sustained focus reinforces autonomy, resilience, and internal freedom. Self-trust becomes reinforced when judgment loses influence. Decisions are based on instinct and principle rather than external reaction. Repeated alignment between choice and internal values strengthens confidence, making hesitation rare and progress natural. Self-trust also reduces anxiety, stress, and mental fatigue. The mind is free to focus on creation, problem-solving, and strategic action. Ultimately, self-trust becomes a foundation for freedom, clarity, and consistent momentum. Presence deepens as judgment loses relevance. Attention fully engages with the current moment, producing clarity, calm, and meaningful action. Presence allows observation without reaction, improving performance, relationships, and decision-making. Energy previously spent on worrying about perception is reclaimed. This heightened engagement increases productivity, focus, and emotional balance. Life becomes more tangible, intentional, and controllable. Presence becomes both a tool and a state of being, sustaining alignment and calm naturally. Clarity emerges as judgment is neutralized. Mental noise diminishes. Priorities become visible, and decision-making improves. Clear perspective reduces hesitation, overthinking, and unnecessary mental effort, allowing energy to be spent on meaningful action. Clarity reinforces focus, consistency, and momentum, producing predictable progress. Stress and doubt decrease naturally. Over time, clarity becomes the foundation for sustainable achievement, growth, and intentional living. Consistency and stability converge as judgment loses power. Daily life flows more easily, energy is concentrated, and decisions become intentional rather than reactive. This convergence produces sustained progress, internal trust, and the ability to act without hesitation or fear of criticism. The alignment between thought, action, and values strengthens. Momentum compounds, producing growth that feels effortless. Consistency becomes second nature, producing reliable, ongoing results in all areas of life. Autonomy solidifies as judgment fades. You operate from priorities, values, and clarity rather than external validation or expectation. Autonomy increases efficiency and effectiveness, as energy is spent creating and acting rather than defending or explaining. This independence builds resilience and confidence. Challenges or criticism no longer derail focus or decision-making. Autonomy becomes a foundation for freedom, stability, and long-term progress. Resilience strengthens as judgment loses influence. Criticism, doubt, and misunderstanding no longer destabilize mental or emotional equilibrium. Resilience allows consistent action despite external noise. Mental and emotional energy is preserved for productive, intentional activity. Repeated exposure to challenges reinforces stability and confidence, producing trust in personal ability and judgment. Resilience becomes habitual, providing a strong framework for sustained progress and achievement. Internal freedom expands as judgment loses relevance. Choices and actions are guided by priorities and alignment rather than fear of criticism. Freedom increases efficiency, focus, and momentum. Hesitation and doubt are replaced with clarity and intentionality. Energy previously spent on defense, self-monitoring, or approval-seeking is redirected to meaningful action. Freedom becomes self-sustaining, reinforcing confidence, focus, and consistent growth. Self-mastery emerges as judgment fades from influence. Thoughts, decisions, and actions become aligned with priorities rather than fear of opinion. Internal guidance dominates, creating a sense of authority over your own life. This mastery improves efficiency and confidence. Choices are deliberate, progress is steady, and energy is no longer wasted on managing perception. Momentum builds naturally. Mastery also strengthens resilience. Challenges and criticism no longer destabilize focus or emotional balance, allowing progress to continue uninterrupted. Over time, self-mastery becomes habitual. Life flows smoothly, decisions are aligned, and personal freedom becomes second nature. Mental clarity expands when judgment loses control over thought. Noise created by anticipating criticism or analyzing perception diminishes, revealing priorities and opportunities. Clarity allows for better problem-solving and decision-making. Energy is directed toward meaningful tasks rather than defense or justification. This increased mental space reduces stress and anxiety. The mind operates efficiently, producing consistent results and reinforcing internal confidence. Clarity becomes a stabilizing foundation, enhancing focus, momentum, and personal effectiveness in all areas. Emotional intelligence strengthens as judgment is observed but not internalized. Reactions are deliberate rather than automatic, and mental energy is preserved for productive action. Awareness of emotional patterns allows strategic responses to challenges, reducing conflict and tension in interactions. This intelligence improves relationships, decision-making, and self-perception. External commentary loses its ability to manipulate emotional state. Over time, emotional intelligence becomes a natural advantage, producing calm, confidence, and clarity under pressure. Independence flourishes as judgment diminishes. Decisions are guided by internal priorities, not fear of criticism or expectation. Independence allows focus on meaningful work, personal growth, and deliberate action. Energy is no longer wasted on perception management. This independence reinforces resilience and self-confidence. Challenges are met with composure, and progress continues steadily regardless of external opinion. Ultimately, independence becomes a defining trait, producing freedom, clarity, and sustainable momentum. Confidence grows quietly as judgment loses influence. Trust in your own instincts replaces the need for reassurance or approval. Decisions feel natural and intentional. Confidence improves efficiency, clarity, and emotional stability. Progress is reinforced with each aligned choice, building trust in personal judgment. This quiet authority reduces hesitation and doubt. Energy is directed toward creation, strategy, and growth rather than defense or overthinking. Eventually, confidence becomes habitual, producing consistent action and freedom from the weight of external opinion. Boundaries become instinctive as judgment is neutralized. Energy is selectively directed toward meaningful priorities, reducing distraction and emotional fatigue. Boundaries protect focus and personal integrity, allowing for consistent, deliberate progress. Interactions become intentional rather than reactive. Respect for self and from others is reinforced through these natural limits. Energy is preserved for what truly matters. Over time, boundaries operate automatically, enabling focus, growth, and stability without conscious effort. Momentum accelerates naturally as judgment loses control. Decisions are made with clarity, and actions compound progress consistently. Each forward step reinforces trust in instinct and internal alignment. Energy is not wasted managing perception or expectation. Momentum builds confidence and resilience, producing results that reinforce focus and action. Progress becomes self-sustaining. This continuous momentum transforms growth into a predictable and reliable force in life. Freedom expands as judgment fades. Actions and decisions are guided by clarity and purpose, rather than fear of criticism. Freedom allows decisive action, uninterrupted focus, and intentional progression toward goals. Hesitation diminishes, replaced with steady movement. Energy previously spent on managing perception is redirected to creativity, problem-solving, and growth. Freedom becomes habitual, producing sustained confidence, clarity, and alignment. Focus sharpens as judgment loses relevance. Attention is fully directed toward meaningful tasks, personal growth, and aligned action. This sharpened focus reduces distraction, conserves energy, and improves productivity. External opinion no longer interrupts progress. Focus strengthens internal alignment, enhancing decision-making, momentum, and emotional stability. Sustained attention amplifies growth, achievement, and clarity, producing a reliable pathway toward purpose. Internal trust strengthens as judgment is neutralized. Decisions are guided by instinct, alignment, and personal values rather than external opinion. Repeated successful choices reinforce trust, reducing hesitation and fear. Confidence grows quietly, and action becomes deliberate. Trust also improves emotional stability, conserving energy for meaningful work instead of worry or defense. Internal trust becomes a cornerstone for freedom, resilience, and consistent achievement. Presence deepens as judgment diminishes. Attention fully engages with the moment, enhancing clarity, calm, and effective action. Presence allows observation without reaction, improving performance, decision-making, and emotional balance. Energy previously spent on perception management is reclaimed. This increased engagement amplifies productivity, focus, and personal clarity. Life feels more intentional and manageable. Presence becomes a natural state, supporting alignment, focus, and momentum continuously. Clarity emerges as judgment fades. Mental noise reduces, priorities become visible, and decision-making improves. Clarity minimizes hesitation and overthinking, freeing energy for meaningful action and productive growth. Focused clarity reinforces alignment and consistency, enhancing outcomes and sustaining momentum. Over time, clarity forms a foundation for stable, intentional, and sustainable progress in life. Consistency, momentum, and focus converge as judgment loses influence. Daily life flows smoothly. Energy is directed toward meaningful tasks, and progress compounds. This convergence produces self-reinforcing growth, internal trust, and confidence. External opinion has minimal impact, and momentum is uninterrupted. Alignment between thought, action, and intention strengthens. Each decision builds upon the last, creating predictable and steady progress. Consistency becomes effortless, producing long-term results, stability, and internal freedom. Autonomy strengthens as judgment is neutralized. Decisions are guided by internal priorities, values, and alignment rather than fear of perception or approval. Autonomy enables deliberate action, conserving energy for important tasks and long-term objectives. Productivity increases naturally. This independence reinforces resilience and confidence. Challenges or criticism do not disrupt focus or progress. Autonomy becomes a defining trait, producing clarity, freedom, and sustainable growth. Resilience strengthens as judgment fades. Criticism, misunderstanding, and doubt no longer destabilize mental or emotional equilibrium. Resilience allows consistent progress despite external noise. Energy is preserved for productive, focused, and intentional action. Repeated exposure to challenge reinforces stability, confidence, and self-trust. Focus remains uninterrupted. Resilience becomes habitual, ensuring sustainable momentum, progress, and personal empowerment. Internal freedom expands when judgment loses influence. Choices and actions are guided by clarity and alignment rather than fear of criticism. Freedom enhances momentum, focus, and effectiveness. Hesitation is replaced with deliberate, intentional action. Energy previously spent defending or explaining is redirected toward meaningful, productive endeavors. This freedom becomes self-sustaining, reinforcing confidence, clarity, and consistent personal growth. Self-awareness sharpens as judgment fades. You observe thoughts and reactions without automatically internalizing opinion, producing clarity, choice, and emotional stability. This heightened awareness allows strategic, deliberate action. Energy is preserved for meaningful decisions, rather than wasted on self-doubt or defense. Awareness also improves decision-making, productivity, and resilience. Life becomes manageable and intentional. Self-awareness becomes habitual, reinforcing momentum, focus, and long-term growth. Growth accelerates as judgment loses control. Energy previously wasted on worrying about opinion is redirected toward deliberate, meaningful action. This acceleration produces compounding results. Progress builds naturally. Confidence strengthens, and internal trust is reinforced. Growth, without judgment-driven distraction, produces resilience, stability, and consistency. Over time, personal development becomes effortless and self-sustaining, guided entirely by intention and alignment. Emotional intelligence strengthens as judgment is neutralized. Reactions become deliberate, energy is preserved, and focus is maintained on priorities. Awareness of emotional patterns allows intentional responses rather than reactive ones, enhancing relationships, decision-making, and self-perception. External commentary loses its ability to disturb emotional balance. Confidence and focus grow simultaneously. Over time, emotional intelligence becomes a natural advantage, producing calm, clarity, and consistent progress. Self-reliance strengthens as judgment fades. You begin to rely on your own instincts and reasoning rather than external validation. Every decision is guided by clarity, purpose, and alignment, producing internal stability and confidence. This reliance allows for more deliberate and intentional action. Tasks are completed efficiently, goals are approached strategically, and energy is preserved for meaningful work rather than defending or justifying choices. Repeated success reinforces trust and judgment, creating a quiet authority that guides decisions naturally. Hesitation diminishes, replaced by assured, steady momentum. Over time, self-reliance becomes habitual. Life flows more predictably. Focus is maintained, and internal freedom strengthens, producing consistent growth and achievement. Focus deepens as judgment loses relevance. Attention is fully directed toward meaningful priorities, minimizing distraction and wasted energy. Mental clarity improves, allowing for more productive and intentional action. Focused energy amplifies progress. Projects are completed efficiently and momentum builds steadily because effort is concentrated rather than dissipated by concerns about perception or approval. This sharpened focus reinforces internal alignment, producing clear, deliberate decisions and reducing anxiety caused by external opinions. Sustained focus becomes a defining strength, enabling continuous personal development and reliable progress toward long-term objectives. Confidence solidifies as judgment diminishes. Trust in your own instincts and abilities grows, producing calm authority and steady momentum in daily life. Confidence allows decisions to be made decisively, without hesitation or overthinking. Each aligned action reinforces internal trust and reduces the influence of external opinion. Emotional stability increases as self-assurance strengthens. Energy is redirected from worry and defensiveness to strategic thinking and productive action. Eventually, confidence becomes second nature. Decisions, actions, and personal growth flow naturally, independent of external validation or judgment. Boundaries become automatic when judgment loses control. You instinctively filter which opinions, comments, or feedback are relevant and which are irrelevant, conserving mental and emotional energy. Boundaries protect focus, maintaining clarity in decision-making and alignment with personal priorities. Energy is spent on meaningful tasks rather than navigating unnecessary criticism or expectation. Respect for self and from others is reinforced through these natural limits, creating an environment conducive to growth, stability, and achievement. Over time, boundaries operate seamlessly, enabling consistent focus, clarity, and freedom. Momentum builds and compounds as judgment fades. Decisions are executed efficiently and confidently, producing continuous progress and reinforcing trust in your own judgment. Momentum produces a self-reinforcing cycle. Each aligned action strengthens the next, while hesitation, doubt, and fear of criticism diminish. Energy is focused on results rather than perception management. Progress becomes predictable, and each forward step reinforces internal trust, clarity, and resilience. Challenges no longer derail action. Momentum eventually becomes self-sustaining, driving consistent growth, achievement, and internal freedom. Emotional independence grows as judgment loses influence. You are no longer controlled by the need for approval or validation. Reactions become optional, deliberate, and strategic rather than automatic. This independence strengthens resilience, allowing challenges and criticism to be met with composure rather than stress or doubt. Energy is preserved for productive, meaningful action. Independence enhances confidence, focus, and clarity, producing consistent progress and reducing distraction caused by external opinion. Emotional independence becomes a stable foundation, supporting long-term growth, autonomy, and intentional living. Presence deepens as judgment becomes irrelevant. Attention fully inhabits the present moment, enhancing clarity, decision-making, and engagement with tasks, people, and opportunities. Presence allows observation without reaction, improving emotional balance, performance, and productivity. Energy previously spent worrying about perception or judgment is reclaimed. This heightened awareness strengthens focus, stability, and alignment with priorities, allowing growth and action to unfold naturally. Presence becomes a defining strength, producing calm, clarity, and effectiveness in every aspect of life. Clarity emerges as judgment fades, mental noise decreases, priorities are visible, and decision-making becomes more deliberate and aligned. Clarity reduces hesitation, overthinking, and wasted energy, enabling focused, meaningful, and intentional action. Progress accelerates because effort is concentrated rather than distracted. Internal alignment is reinforced, producing predictable, reliable outcomes and reinforcing trust in judgment and instinct. Clarity becomes a cornerstone for sustained momentum, focus, and long-term achievement. Consistency, momentum, and internal alignment converge as judgment loses influence. Daily life flows more smoothly, decisions are intentional, and progress compounds naturally. This convergence produces sustained confidence, focus, and personal growth. External opinion loses its power to interrupt rhythm or stability. Internal priorities are reinforced through repeated, deliberate action, producing results that strengthen trust in instinct and judgment. Consistency becomes second nature, producing freedom, alignment, and predictable long-term progress. Autonomy strengthens as judgment fades. Decisions are guided by internal priorities and alignment rather than perception, expectation, or fear of criticism. Autonomy allows deliberate, focused action, enabling energy to be directed toward meaningful objectives. Productivity, growth, and clarity are naturally enhanced. Independence reinforces resilience, allowing challenges and criticism to be faced without disruption or hesitation. Autonomy becomes a defining characteristic, producing freedom, clarity, and consistent personal progress. Resilience deepens as judgment loses relevance. External criticism, doubt, and misunderstanding no longer destabilize emotional or mental equilibrium. Resilience allows sustained progress despite challenges, producing confidence, focus, and stability. Energy is preserved for intentional action rather than reaction. Repeated exposure to difficulty strengthens internal stability, trust, and momentum. Actions become deliberate, predictable, and self-reinforcing. Resilience becomes habitual, supporting consistent growth, achievement, and personal empowerment over time. Internal freedom expands as judgment diminishes. Choices are guided by alignment and priority rather than fear of criticism or approval. Freedom enhances decisiveness, clarity, and momentum. Hesitation and doubt are replaced by intentional, deliberate action. Energy previously spent on perception management is redirected toward meaningful, productive efforts. This freedom becomes self-sustaining, reinforcing confidence, clarity, and consistent personal growth. Self-awareness sharpens as judgment fades. Thoughts, reactions, and patterns are observed without automatic internalization, producing clarity, choice, and emotional stability. Heightened awareness enables strategic, deliberate action. Energy is preserved for meaningful decisions rather than worry or overthinking. Awareness improves productivity, problem-solving, and resilience. Life becomes manageable, intentional, and focused. Self-awareness becomes habitual, strengthening alignment, momentum, and sustainable growth. Growth accelerates when judgment loses control. Energy previously consumed by worrying about perception or approval is redirected toward intentional, meaningful action. Acceleration produces compounding results. Progress builds naturally, confidence strengthens, and internal trust increases. Growth without distraction fosters resilience, stability, and consistency, producing predictable achievement. Over time, personal development becomes self-sustaining, effortless, and entirely guided by internal alignment. Emotional intelligence strengthens as judgment fades. Reactions become deliberate rather than automatic, and energy is preserved for priority-driven action. Awareness of emotional patterns allows intentional responses to challenges, improving relationships, decision-making, and self-perception. External opinion loses its ability to destabilize emotional state, reinforcing confidence, calm, and focus. Emotional intelligence becomes a natural advantage, producing consistent, intentional progress. Self-trust solidifies as judgment diminishes. Decisions are guided by instinct, alignment, and internal principles rather than external reaction. Repeated, aligned action reinforces trust, reduces hesitation, and strengthens confidence. Decision-making becomes deliberate and effective. Self-trust improves emotional stability, conserving energy for growth and productive work rather than worrying about opinion. Internal trust becomes a foundation for freedom, resilience, and sustainable achievement. Focus sharpens as judgment loses influence. Attention fully engages with meaningful priorities, minimizing distraction and conserving energy. This refined focus enhances productivity, decision-making, and momentum. External opinion no longer interrupts alignment or growth. Focused energy reinforces clarity, resilience, and confidence, producing consistent results. Sustained focus becomes a defining trait, supporting long-term progress, achievement, and personal freedom. Presence deepens as judgment fades. Attention fully inhabits the moment, improving clarity, decision-making, and engagement with tasks and opportunities. Presence allows observation without reaction, reducing stress and improving productivity, emotional balance, and performance. Heightened engagement amplifies effectiveness, alignment, and calm, enabling smooth, intentional action. Presence becomes a natural, habitual state, reinforcing focus, clarity, and internal freedom. Decision-making strengthens as judgment loses relevance. Choices are guided by priorities and alignment rather than fear of perception or criticism. Decisions are deliberate, decisive, and efficient, minimizing hesitation and doubt. Energy is directed toward meaningful action rather than defending or explaining. This clarity and alignment enhance momentum, consistency, and confidence, producing reliable, predictable outcomes. Decision-making becomes effortless and self-reinforcing, supporting continuous growth, freedom, and focus. Consistency, clarity, and alignment converge as judgment diminishes. Daily life flows naturally, progress compounds, and focus remains undisturbed by external opinion. This convergence produces sustained momentum, self-trust, and confidence. Actions are deliberate, results are predictable, and energy is optimized. Alignment between thought, action, and priority strengthens, reinforcing internal freedom and stability. Consistency becomes automatic, producing ongoing growth, achievement, and internal clarity. Autonomy becomes dominant as judgment fades. Decisions are made independently, guided by internal alignment, rather than external expectation or perception. Autonomy improves efficiency, focus, and productivity. Energy is directed toward meaningful action, supporting deliberate and sustainable growth. Independence reinforces resilience and confidence, allowing consistent progress despite criticism or challenge. Autonomy becomes a defining trait, producing freedom, alignment, and consistent achievement. Consistency deepens as judgment loses influence. Daily actions are guided by intention rather than fear of opinion. Habits become aligned with priorities, producing natural progress and momentum that compounds over time. This alignment reinforces trust in your own judgment. Each deliberate choice strengthens confidence, reduces hesitation, and frees mental energy for meaningful action. External opinions no longer derail focus or direction. Momentum emerges naturally as repeated action produces results. Energy is conserved, effort becomes more efficient, and progress accelerates without conscious strain. Over time, consistency becomes effortless, creating reliable patterns that support freedom, stability, and long-term achievement. Focus strengthens as judgment fades. Attention becomes fully devoted to priorities, minimizing distractions and wasted energy. Clarity emerges naturally, producing better decision-making and intentional action. Sharpened focus increases efficiency and effectiveness. Projects are completed more quickly, results improve, and energy is preserved for creation rather than defense. Focused action reinforces confidence and internal trust. As each step produces measurable progress, momentum builds steadily, independent of external validation. Sustained focus becomes habitual, allowing long-term success, consistent growth, and a sense of internal freedom. Resilience grows as judgment loses relevance. Challenges, criticism, or misunderstanding no longer destabilize progress or confidence. Resilience allows consistent movement toward goals, even in the face of obstacles. Mental and emotional energy is preserved for action rather than reacting to external input. Repeated success reinforces trust in personal judgment and the ability to overcome difficulty. Momentum becomes self-sustaining, independent of perception. Resilience becomes a natural, habitual strength, supporting freedom, clarity, and steady growth in every aspect of life. Internal freedom expands as judgment diminishes. Decisions are guided by alignment and intention, rather than fear of criticism or expectation. Freedom enhances decisiveness, momentum, and clarity. Hesitation fades, replaced by deliberate, purposeful action toward meaningful outcomes. Energy previously spent on perception management is redirected toward productivity, growth, and achievement. This freedom becomes self-reinforcing, producing confidence, stability, and sustained progress. Self-awareness deepens when judgment is released. Thoughts, reactions, and habitual patterns are observed without automatic internalization, producing clarity, choice, and emotional stability. Heightened awareness allows for intentional decision-making and focused action. Energy is preserved for meaningful tasks, rather than worrying about perception or approval. Awareness strengthens alignment, reinforcing momentum, confidence, and internal trust. Decisions become deliberate and intentional. Self-awareness becomes a foundational habit, producing clarity, freedom, and continuous personal growth. Growth accelerates when judgment loses influence. Energy previously consumed by worry or self-monitoring is redirected toward intentional action. This acceleration produces compounding results. Progress builds naturally, confidence strengthens, and trust in judgment solidifies. Growth without distraction fosters stability, resilience, and consistent achievement. Life moves forward efficiently and purposefully. Over time, personal development becomes effortless, aligned, and self-sustaining. Emotional intelligence strengthens as judgment fades. Reactions are deliberate rather than automatic, and energy is preserved for meaningful engagement. Awareness of emotional patterns allows strategic responses to challenges, improving relationships, decision-making, and overall clarity. External commentary loses power to destabilize, reinforcing calm, confidence, and consistent focus. Emotional intelligence becomes a natural advantage, supporting clarity, freedom, and long-term growth. Autonomy flourishes when judgment diminishes. Decisions are guided by internal alignment rather than expectation, approval, or fear. Autonomy produces deliberate, focused action and preserves energy for what matters most. Productivity, clarity, and momentum increase naturally. Resilience and confidence are strengthened, allowing consistent action even in the face of criticism or challenge. Autonomy becomes a defining trait, producing sustainable freedom, focus, and personal growth. Momentum compounds as judgment loses control. Actions are executed decisively and efficiently, producing continuous progress. Each step reinforces the next, building trust, confidence, and internal alignment. Hesitation diminishes, and fear of external opinion becomes irrelevant. Momentum reinforces resilience, producing steady progress that is self-sustaining. Energy is fully directed toward meaningful, intentional outcomes. This self-sustaining momentum becomes a cornerstone of freedom, clarity, and consistent achievement. Presence deepens when judgment loses relevance. Attention fully inhabits the moment, enhancing clarity, emotional balance, and effective action. Presence allows observation without reaction, improving focus, productivity, and decision-making. Energy previously lost to worry or fear is reclaimed. Heightened awareness enhances alignment, producing deliberate, intentional actions and reinforcing internal trust. Presence becomes a habitual state, strengthening focus, freedom, and long-term sustainable growth. Decision-making strengthens as judgment fades. Choices are guided by priorities, values, and alignment rather than fear or external expectation. Decisions are deliberate, decisive, and efficient. Hesitation diminishes, and actions are consistently aligned with meaningful objectives. This alignment enhances momentum, confidence, and clarity, producing predictable, reliable results. Decision-making becomes a natural strength, supporting sustained growth, focus, and freedom. Consistency, clarity, and alignment converge as judgment diminishes. Life flows naturally, progress compounds, and focus remains undisturbed by external influence. This convergence produces self-reinforcing growth, trust, and confidence. External opinion loses power over decision-making or momentum. Deliberate, aligned action becomes habitual, creating predictable, steady progress. Internal freedom and stability are strengthened. Consistency becomes effortless, producing sustainable achievement, internal clarity, and long-term progress. Self-trust solidifies as judgment fades. Decisions are guided by instinct, values, and personal alignment, rather than external influence or fear. Repeated success reinforces confidence, reduces hesitation, and strengthens internal stability. Decision-making becomes deliberate and reliable. Trust improves emotional resilience, conserves energy, and produces sustainable focus for meaningful action. Internal self-trust becomes a foundational pillar of freedom, momentum, and long-term growth. Focus sharpens as judgment loses influence. Attention fully engages with priorities, producing more effective action and conserving mental energy. This refined focus amplifies productivity, clarity, and alignment, allowing for continuous progress without distraction. Focused energy reinforces confidence, momentum, and internal stability, reducing stress and hesitation. Sustained focus becomes a habitual strength, supporting consistent growth, achievement, and freedom. Presence deepens as judgment fades. Attention inhabits the moment fully, enhancing clarity, decision-making, and intentional action. Presence allows observation without reaction, reducing distraction and improving performance, emotional balance, and productivity. Heightened engagement strengthens alignment and internal trust, enabling deliberate, steady action. Presence becomes a natural state, reinforcing focus, momentum, and freedom. Internal freedom expands when judgment diminishes. Choices are guided by alignment and intention rather than fear of opinion. Freedom enhances decisiveness, momentum, and clarity. Hesitation is replaced by deliberate, intentional action toward meaningful outcomes. Energy previously lost to perception management is redirected toward growth, productivity, and achievement. This freedom becomes self-reinforcing, producing consistent clarity, confidence, and long-term progress. Emotional independence grows as judgment fades. Reactions become intentional, deliberate, and optional rather than automatic. Independence strengthens resilience, allowing challenges or criticism to be met with composure rather than anxiety. Energy is preserved for meaningful work, creative endeavors, and personal priorities. Emotional independence becomes a stable foundation, supporting focus, momentum, and sustainable growth. Self-awareness sharpens as judgment diminishes. Thoughts, reactions, and habitual patterns are observed without internalizing external opinion. Heightened awareness enables strategic, deliberate action, conserving energy for meaningful decisions. Awareness strengthens alignment, reinforcing momentum, confidence, and internal trust. Self-awareness becomes habitual, producing clarity, freedom, and continuous personal growth. Growth accelerates when judgment loses influence. Energy previously consumed by worry or fear is redirected toward deliberate action. Acceleration produces compounding results. Progress builds naturally, confidence strengthens, and trust in judgment solidifies. Growth without distraction fosters stability, resilience, and consistency, producing predictable achievement. Over time, personal development becomes effortless, aligned, and self-sustaining. Now imagine living free from the weight of judgment. Every step you take is deliberate, intentional, and aligned with your priorities. Decisions flow naturally, energy is fully preserved for what matters most, and momentum builds without obstruction. Fear, hesitation, and doubt no longer dictate your actions. Your focus sharpens, clarity emerges, emotional stability becomes habitual, boundaries protect your energy, presence anchors your attention, and self-trust guides every choice. You move forward with confidence, resilience, and unstoppable momentum, independent of opinion or expectation. This is not a distant dream. It is a reality available to anyone willing to release judgment and act in alignment with their own principles. Each small, consistent step compounds into lasting progress. Each aligned choice strengthens freedom. Each moment lived intentionally reinforces internal clarity and trust. The truth is simple but profound. Judgment will always exist, but it only has the power you give it. Release it. Trust yourself. Take action. Live with purpose. Move with clarity. And let the momentum of your aligned, fearless life carry you toward the freedom, growth, and success you deserve.